Welcome to the Fresh and Safe podcast, brought to you by the Fresh Produce Safety Centre. I'm your host, Damien Farrelly. This pilot series has been delivered via the Horticulture Food Safety Initiative project, which is co-funded by Hort Innovations Frontiers, retailers, regulators, and industry partners. We're here to share fresh ideas and practical insights to elevate food safety in the produce supply chain. Whether you're a grower, a food safety specialist, service provider, or part of the broader food safety ecosystem, join us as we navigate the evolving landscape of fresh produce food safety in New Zealand, Australia, and around the world. In this week's episode, I'm delighted to be joined by Livia Esterhazy from A Lighter Touch to talk about agroecology, biological controls for crop protection, implications for food safety, and bridging the gap between science and implementation on farm. So welcome, Livia, to the show.
Thank you. So good to be here.
So could you tell us a bit about yourself and what got you into this area in the first place?
Yeah, look, just fabulously lucky, to be honest, because I am hugely passionate about the health of the planet and ourselves through food. I've got a French background, and if you can imagine those stories, mostly rom-coms about French grandmas cooking up a feast, and that was my childhood. So everything was, grown and cooked from scratch. So there's a massive love of food in our family, but I'd never actually worked in the horticulture space. So when this role came around, which obviously did touch on the environmental and the sustainability space, I sort of jumped at the opportunity to it. And I've learned so much in the last, 3 years in the role.
Can you tell us a bit more about A Lighter Touch, especially for our Australian listeners who might not be aware of the programme?
Absolutely. So A Lighter Touch is a $27 million 7-year program. We're in our 5th year, and it is with 15 different stakeholders, industry and government. And the role of the Lighter Touch program is basically to reduce or help reduce the reliance of agrochemistry and move to a much more agroecological approach for our growers. And the main drivers that actually gave birth to A Lighter Touch was things that I'm sure our Australian colleagues have touch on as well, which is resistance management. So resistance is very much growing, and there are a lot of concerns by our growers that they don't have enough tools in the toolbox to deal with it. Regulatory changes, so certain products that come off the shelves, again, then there's nothing left in the toolbox. Market access, so exporters, are dealing with different restricted market access in certain countries. And some countries, it's not just government regulations that are shifting, it's the retails, the larger Tesco's that are actually putting on even more requirements for food to be imported into their countries. And of course, consumer preference, right? So consumers want minimal pesticides on their food as possible. So we are working with growers to do trials and demonstrations and show new ways of, how they could look after their crops and introduce different systems onto farm systems, so for crop protection. So it's not about no chemistry. It's about really increasing the tools in their toolbox with chemistry there, but only using chemistry or synthetic chemistry when you really, really need it. So again, that resistance doesn't build up, and there's minimal residue. Hence the A Lighter Touch name. So we are focused on trials and demonstrations, finding new tools. We are working in the regulatory pathway space to help bring in new tools as much as we can in New Zealand, and resistance management and supporting the building of strategies and sharing of knowledge. And actually in our last year and a half of the program, that sharing of knowledge has become a real strategic priority. So we don't want, all these projects and trials and demonstration and the results sitting on a shelf somewhere. We want them in the hands of growers, and so they can learn and trial on their crops as well. And even if the trial was a failure, that's a learning in itself. So it's not necessarily that every single trial was brilliant. It is, or successful. It's every learning that we possibly can give them, we need to bring them out. So we're doing a lot of work in the extension space this year.
It's a pretty comprehensive project when you think about it, looking at all these angles: regulatory, retailer, consumer, science and then adoption by growers. But I really like that you're creating that toolbox for growers and giving them additional options, because as you know, the options that they have are reducing. So to be able to increase the options is phenomenal. And I think also is achieving many of those outcomes with a lighter touch. Been a brilliant name for it.
Yeah, it was. It was, and it's complex, right? Because there's 15 different stakeholder groups in the tent, from the very big ones like zespri, for example, kiwi fruit, all the way to the tiny, little passion fruit or feijoa crops as well, arable, viticulture. So it's quite diverse. And then obviously, intertwined with government, and we've got some crop protection organisations like Corteva and Key Industries that are partnering with us, and PGG Wrightson as well, a merchant organisation here in New Zealand. So it's really a complex, multi-armed program, but the collaboration is the key to it, and it's brilliant in that way.
Yeah, and you haven't been afraid of bridging those gaps, I suppose, with collaboration. It's quite, I suppose, what would you say, milestone project in that way, or landmark project where...
Yeah, I think it is. And I think we're very lucky in a way, because the team is super collaborative, but also A Lighter Touch is not an advocacy group. We're also not government. We're not a retailer. Nobody can sort of fit us into a box, which has meant that we've been able to become a really good enabler. And a lot of people have called us sort of the glue that, glues a lot of these organizations together, because certain organizations will stop at a certain point and won't go across. So we've been able to help support that collaboration between organizations and their knowledge, and get it out there. So that's been really exciting. Yeah, really exciting.
So we've used the word agroecology a few times, and it might seem like a basic question, but could you...
Not a basic question. I certainly didn't know what it was when I first came on board. Basically what I've learned is agroecology is a combination of agriculture, so that includes horticulture, and ecology, right? So it's the science and practice of farming and growing informed by ecological science. But to be honest, in human speak, which is how I speak, like a 12-year-old, it's about getting nature to work for you in your farming system and not against you. So some examples of that are like increasing biodiversity plants around your crops, which will attract beneficial insects, which will then feed on the pest insects that you have in your crop. So it'll help with pollination, for example, as well. So it is about using nature to help fight nature and not work against nature. That's probably the easiest way I would use to describe agroecology.
Awesome. Yeah, and I heard probably on your podcast recently on the approach of, before chemistry, we were doing that. We were working with nature. So in some ways, it's a bit of back to the future, and a lot more science backing it up. So, your thoughts on that?
Yeah, 100%. So, again, if I go back to my grandma, who was growing a lot of her own food in France, and a lot of, local growers here in the Nelson and Tasman region, there are a lot of people that sit there going, what are you talking about? Of course we do companion planting. Of course we've used beneficial plants. We've rotated our crops within our little, plot of vegetable patch and blah, blah, blah. I don't know what you're talking about, but it's doing it at a commercial scale. That's the difference, right? And to be able to ensure that you've got enough yield and that the growers can trust that yield that's going to come through, that is the difference, right? So yes, absolutely. It's not new news. There's been a lot of our grandparents, our great-grandparents, they've been doing this, working a lot more with nature. And then came the agrichemicals, and everyone went, sweet, this is easy. I can just spray and I know what's going to happen. So it is absolutely back to the future. Yeah.
Well, interesting. So I think what you've said there is really about the confidence in the practices, and then the ability to trust in them, that they can be done at a commercial level, because it's quite a different story for a family farm up to a larger scale.
100%. And the growers, rightly so, many of them are risk averse, which is why some of our programs are about demonstrating the shift. So we had one, for example, on the Pukekohe research farm up north, and we did a lettuce crop using beneficial insects, and we brought the lettuce growers from the region in week by week. So from the planting onwards for about 12 weeks to see the whole cycle go through. And it was hilarious because at one point the pest insects were coming in and the growers started to get really anxious, going, you're going to lose your crop. You've absolutely got to spray. This is insane. Look at the insects. And fabulously, our lead grower there were like, no, you let nature do its thing. You've got to make it happen. And sure enough, the pest pressure got high, but of course the beneficials came in and went, yay, lunch. So the beneficials took over and had a feast. And the following week, the pest pressure came right down. And we've, tracked all of this scientifically as well. And they were blown away by seeing in their own, in real life, exactly what happens. And we were able to harvest a full commercial spray-free, crop of lettuce, and it was sold, which was just incredible. So then from that moment onwards, a lot of those growers went back and went, okay, all right, this is not just crazy. Let's give this a bit of a go. And we did a similar trial with brassicas, and we were able to reduce the use of pesticides by 2/3. And again, the growers were like, there's no way, you're going to be able to do this without the chemistry at all. And yeah, we showed them that it was possible. So, it's really exciting to show the possibilities to growers and de-risk it for them on farm and have them trial, a little bit by little bit. We certainly don't want growers to shift their entire farm system overnight, but slowly moving in that direction is the way to go.
Slowly moving in that direction, and I think having that positive feedback loops where you're saying examples of how it's worked and when it's worked, and then having those predictive tools that enable growers to actually have confidence in what the practices that they're adopting. And then to your other point there about slowly increasing the scale of it, so it's gone from lab scale, now we're having it doing it at farm level, but maybe just in that trial stage still, but eventually you can see it getting to that large scale, which is all part of the journey. So
100%. And so Lighter Touch has never been in the lab space. We've always done on farm, so it's always been products that are out there. But if you look at tomatoes, for example, we introduced BCAs, biocontrol agents, when there was a real issue with tomato potato psyllid, and there was no tools in the toolbox for it. So there was a real, risk to greenhouse crop planting, for tomatoes, as to, goodness, we've got nothing, nothing against this. This is really dodgy. And with the biocontrol agents that we put in, they are now completely spray-free. And of course, it started with a few glass houses or greenhouses, and now all of them, basically the major tomato growers are all using this approach now, and a lot of smaller ones are coming on board as well. So it's fantastic to see, how people are adopting it, different approaches that will support the growth of their product, the growth of their crops. Yeah.
And what about co-benefits there? Are there financial benefits from a grower's perspective to using that tomato example, or labor benefits or other benefits that you can?
Yeah, absolutely. So it's not just spray free. If you think about it, you're spraying a lot less pesticides. So one of the cultural approaches is to actually look or use AI or scouting devices to understand when there's enough pest pressure or when the disease might be in your crop, rather than going, oh, it's July 1 or January 1, I'm spraying and I will spray the entire crop. It's about, again, working with nature and going, maybe botrytis spores are not as, intense this year as they were last year, and we can hold off on spraying. So there has been absolutely, definitely, decreases in the level of pesticide use in certain trials, which has been, absolutely a great cost benefit.
What are the benefits from a food safety outcomes perspective? And is a Lighter Touch supporting growers to meet food safety standards, thinking like maximum residue limits or and the likes? Any thoughts on that angle?
Yeah. No, absolutely. I mean, as I said before, one of the drivers of the Lighter Touch is that consumers want food as pesticide free as possible. So that was an underlying driver for us. So the work we are trialing and demonstrating to growers is about giving them tools so that chemicals are as a last resort. And as I said to you before, like the minimal residue that we work on as possible is what we are going for. So, as well as using biological products that are basically living organisms, right? We're talking about cultural practices like as I said before, crop rotation, but also bringing in technology. So, we've used ultraviolet light to help with powdery mildew on vineyards, and looking at that in stone fruit as well, which is just incredible. So it really is reducing that reliance on synthetic chemistry, which is only going to benefit food safety, because we're talking that there is no spray, there is no residue on the food.
We've heard some really good stories already, but I'm wondering if you've got something in your mind from the last few years that you think of as what is the biggest win from the program so far?
We've done and still doing about 55 different projects in the agroecological space and trial and demonstration space. There's a lot there. We've also done a lot of efficacy and residue work. So we've undertaken about 83 trials, evaluating about 120 different crop protection solutions in that space. So again, there's a lot of work being there. But I think, one of the proudest things, I think, is the collaboration, across sectors is really exciting to see. And it's not something that they'd done before. So if I look at, for example, one of the projects we started in citrus, which was about biodiversity planting between the orchards and attracting the right insects for citrus. And even though that particular trial over 2 years went through a flood 1 year and then Cyclone Gabrielle the second year, we had enough data for summer fruit to go, actually, we want to try that in summer fruit. So they've taken as much as they could and built on that. And then the Vegetables New Zealand team then took that as well and went, actually, we're going to trial that at Pukekohe Demonstration Farm, which are the projects I was talking about. And it's now extending out and well beyond even the current people that are, current stakeholders that are in the tent. So there are people like Trevelyan who picked up our resource guides of how to do the biodiversity planting, et cetera, and, put it through their orchard as well. As we've heard some news that avocado growers as well have been using this sort of thing. Applebee's down here in the Tasman region are trialing right now biodiversity, but some of the dreams is to have biodiversity corridors in the whole Waimea Plains here. So it's that sort of infiltration and collaboration across sectors, fruit, vegetables, kiwi fruit, etc., is super exciting. I think that's one of the greatest wins of the program.
So with all of those great findings that you've had, and say it is kind of getting momentum in many ways, but what would you say has been the approach for bridging between maybe those on-farm trials and then adoption by individual growers that are doing the trials, and then maybe for other growers that are not doing the trials? How have you been bridging the gap between, I suppose, maybe the theory and the adoption?
And the adoption, yeah, look, that's been a really big challenge. There are two big programs of work that we've undertaken in the last year that are rolling out now. One is understanding the environment of extension in New Zealand, right, which is very patchwork, quilt. And so we did a bit of research with all of our product groups or our sector groups to understand what their capability was in extension, what their capacity was in extension. And again, you've got some of the bigger groups like, FAR and so Arable Research and Zespri, who have got extension teams. But when you move to the smaller crops like strawberries or boysenberries or, I don't know, tomato. I mean, even tomatoes sometimes, it's the capacity is not there. Those people are, the admin person, the accountant, the researcher, one person almost does absolutely everything in there. So it's really hard for them to be extending all this knowledge. So that's what we discovered is, okay, there's definitely gaps in there, and the capability or understanding what good extension looks like, so that it's not random acts of extension. Oh yeah, we've got, let's throw this out to the growers and they'll adopt it. It's like, no, it doesn't work that way. Humans are not like that. So it's understanding that, and we've put a program together with Scarlatti that has been really supporting our sector groups and extension specialists to come together to actually build a platform so that they learn from each other. And there's a community of practice actually that we've literally just launched around extension specialists from across New Zealand, so they can share knowledge of what's working, what's not working, especially as a lot of our communication platforms are shifting, and growers will take on knowledge from certain areas and not other areas. So that's been really, really helpful. So that's one big program around helping support our sector groups with capability and capacity and learnings around extension. The other one is recognizing that this is a massive behavioural change program, that a lighter touch is actually all about behaviour change and supporting our growers from, this is what I've done for the last 40 years. Why would I change? Thank you very much. To, okay, actually there might be a different way, and might be a better way. Let me trial it, and helping de-risk that for them, right? And giving them as much information as needed, but also emotionally helping them de-risk. Me, from a big advertising background, I know for a fact that, you give people information and they will come to a conclusion, but they will not necessarily change their behavior. It's emotionally, you need to talk to them emotionally, and then they'll start to change their behavior. And whether that's joy or fear or whatever, but it is about how do we bring our growers on a journey that's at their pace as well. Some will be a lot less, there are some amazing growers out there that are innovative, not risk averse. They want to trial it. They're reaping the rewards. Look at tomatoes, they're off and running. So that's really, really exciting. And there are some others that, are struggling a little bit more, might need a bit more support. So we are doing a lot in the last 18 months around supporting that behavior shift on farm for our growers, so that they're aware of the different tools, eyes wide open, able to adopt and feel confident enough to adopt when and where and how. But again, as I said, it's not about changing the entire farm system overnight. Like, that's too much of a risk. But, what are the little steps that they can take? Carve out a little plot on their field or their, in their crops, and trial it for a year, learn, maybe extend it the following year. Yeah.
Cool. So you're taking that long game, and you mentioned growers been risk averse, but also many growers very innovative. So it is just about having the evidence to back up that the tools do work, I suppose. And then you get the early adopters, and then it's about bringing everyone on that journey, recognizing different parts of the sector are resourced differently, and you have different levels of sophistication even within businesses. Some businesses have people that are dedicated to this part of the business, and then other ones, as you say, the one person's doing 10 different roles. If I was a grower and wanting to reduce agrichemical use or look at testing biologicals, where would I start?
Well, the first thing that you might do is actually go and talk to your agronomists, because you don't want to just potentially trial things on your own. The other thing that you would want to do is talk to your sector group, actually, because, sometimes the comms may not filter all the way through about what we have been working on, because there is, as I've talked about, there's a lot going on. So it's not everything that gets filtered through to every single grower. So I would reach out to your sector group and ask, okay, what have we been trialing within a lighter touch? What is relevant to us from a biological perspective? Obviously, jumping onto our website, A Lighter Touch, just Google A Lighter Touch, it's the easiest way. And looking at the resources section, because we put together videos, but also resources and decision trees, and as much as we possibly can, so that people can pick up, some of the effective strategies and trial it on their property. And we're continuing to add to that. So we're doing a lot of work in the biological space. So that would be my hint, would be go speak to your sector group to see what's there. Go speak to your agronomists, and check out the website. There's a lot of resources on that site.
Cool. And I would probably advocate as well to sign up for the newsletter, and have your podcast as well. It's awesome information, and they're really helpful.
Absolutely. Yeah. The newsletter is gold. It's really, really increased. We're also on LinkedIn, so it's over 2,000 followers now on LinkedIn, which is massive. But the newsletter, I think, is the primary way to get an update. So the minute we finish a case study, or even halfway through a case study, if there's findings, we put it into our newsletter. So we keep everybody up to speed with any resources that are launched. And as you say, our podcast is there, so you can plug yourself in and listen. It's on all the normal podcast platforms, as well as the Lighter Touch site.
Well, thank you very much, Livia. This has been such an interesting conversation, really insightful. suppose, incredible insights from your perspective as well. Thank you so much. I'd say we could talk all day. But yeah, I just really appreciate you for joining us on the show, sharing your insights, and giving us a bit of an overview of the Lighter Touch program. Sounds like it's been rising success. No doubt you've gone through a lot of challenges and barriers. We didn't talk about that, but you really are bearing fruits from some really hard work. So well done, and all the best for the rest of the program.
Thank you so much, and I hope your listeners have got some good things out of it, and trial and test. But really thrilled to be on this podcast. Thank you so much, Damien, for having us. It's been a great honour to share some of the learnings and what we're up to.